Mayday, mayday, mayday. Scandinavian Star is on fire.
Hey fellas, welcome back to my channel. I'm Celine and today we're doing our first deep dive. And we're gonna talk about the fire on the Scandinavian Star. On April 7, 1990, a fire broke out on board a passenger ferry traveling between Norway and Denmark. What started as a normal overnight journey turned into one of the deadliest maritime disasters in modern Scandinavian history, killing 159 people. And today marks the 36th anniversary of that night. Before becoming the Scandinavian Star, she was MS Massalia, built by Division Normandy SA in 1971 and delivered to Compagnie de Paquebot, putting her to the Massalia-Malaga-Casablanca route. Her gross tonnage would be 10,513 gross registered tons, with her length being 466.7 feet. She would have had a beam of 73 feet and she could go a speed of 20 knots. She was launched on January 19, 1971 and completed the same year. In addition to her service, she also operated cruises in the Mediterranean Sea. By 1974, she had been owned by a number of companies and renamed a few times. She was once Stena Baltica, Island Fiesta, and finally Scandinavian Star, given to her by the Scandinavian World Cruises. Scandinavian Star was chartered for cruises between St. Petersburg, Tampa, Florida, United States to Cozumel, Quintana Roo, Mexico. Scandinavian Star had been stricken by multiple fires throughout its history. During the investigation of the 1990 fire, investigators learned that unreported fires had also occurred in 1985, caused by a deep fryer, and twice more in 1988, the first caused by a broken lubricating pipe. On 15th of March 1988, just a few days after the first fire, Scandinavian Star was about 50 nautical miles northeast from Cancun when a second fired and started in the engine room. The ship, which was then carrying 439 passengers and 268 crew members, lost its power supply and emergency oxygen system, hampering the fire crew's efforts. The inability of the crew members to communicate effectively with each other and with passengers was a serious concern and created confusion during the firefighting and evacuation procedures. In 1990, Scandinavian Star was assigned on the Oslo-Frederikshavn route for Norwegian shipping line DANO Linjen. As she had been converted from a casino ship to a passenger ferry, Scandinavian Star's crew had to be trained in 10 days to learn new responsibilities, whereas 6 to 8 weeks training would have been a reasonable period to train a crew for a ship of her size. Many of the crew members didn't speak English, Norwegian, or Danish, further reducing the effectiveness of the crew's response to an emergency. Eric Stein, technical leader for the Norwegian Marine Insurance Company, had inspected the ship and declared of the fire preparedness deficient, citing defective fire doors among the other reasons. During the night of April 7, 1990, at about 2 a.m., a fire broke out and was discovered by a passenger and was brought to the attention of the receptionist. The fire spread from deck 3 to deck 4, stopping at deck 5. The stairwells and ceilings were like chimneys from the fire, causing it to spread. Although the bulkheads were made of steel structure with asbestos wallboards, a melamine resin laminate was used as a decorative covering and proved extremely flammable in subsequent testing, spreading fire through deck 3. The burning laminates produced toxic hydrogen cyanide and carbon monoxide. The fire then spread to deck 4 and deck 5. When the captain heard about the fire, he attempted to close the bulkhead fire doors on deck 3. The fire doors were not configured for fully automatic closing and did not respond since the emergency alarms near the doors had not been manually triggered by the passengers or crew. Vehicle storage area ventilated by large fans to remove exhaust fumes and was also located nearby, and the fence pulled air through an improperly secured fire door and caused rapid fire progress from deck 3 to deck 4 and deck 5 via stairways located either end. The captain later ordered his crew to turn off the ventilation system when he realized it was feeding the fire. An intended result was that smoke was able to enter passenger cabins via door vents. Some tried to seek refuge from the smoke in areas such as closets and bedrooms or remain asleep in their beds, but eventually overcome by smoke. Those who tried to escape may have variously encountered by thick smoke, confusing corridor layouts, and poorly trained crew members. The investigators proposed several reasons for why many passengers did not safely evacuate. 1. Many people did not hear the alarms due to the distance between their cabins and the alarms, and due to the ordinary mechanical noise of the ship systems. 2. Some people probably could not find their way out because of the thick smoke obscuring the exit routes and signage. 3. Burning melamine panels in the hallways produced poisonous hydrogen cyanide and carbon monoxide gases, causing rapid unconsciousness and death. 4. Numerous Portuguese crew members did not speak or understand Norwegian, Danish, or English, were unfamiliar with the ship, and had never been practiced a fire drill. Only a few crew members even thought to put up breathing masks before entering the smoke-filled corridors. 5. On deck 5, where most of the passengers' deaths occurred, the hallways were arranged in a layout that contained dead ends and did not otherwise logically lead to emergency exits. The captain ordered the general alarms to be activated, told everyone to abandon ship, and sent out a mayday call. The captain and crew ultimately abandoned the ship before all passengers were evacuated, leaving many still on board the burning ship, even after it was towed to the harbor. The ship was towed to Lysekil, Sweden, where the fire department suppressed the fire in 10 hours. The captain said that the ferry was carrying 395 passengers and 97 crew on the day of the fire. It was later determined that 158 people, or approximately one-third of all passengers on board, died on the ship. Another victim died 2 weeks later from his injuries. 136 of those killed were Norwegian. As many of the victims' remains were damaged by the fire, more than 100 specialists, including police technicians, forensic pathologists, and forensic dentists, worked to identify all the recovered remains. It was initially reported that many of the bodies found were children, but Swedish police were quoted as stating that children under the age of 7 were not included on the passenger list, causing confusion on actual counts. Also, police investigation has suspected Erik Mort Andersen, a Danish truck driver who died in the disaster, and who had 3 previous convictions for arson. A later investigation in 2009 determined that there were several separate fires and that multiple people would have been needed to start them, especially if they were not familiar with the layout of the ship. A 2013 report prepared by a self-appointed Norwegian group called Foundation for Arson Investigation Scandinavian Star denied that Andersen was responsible, claiming instead that multiple fires were deliberately set, and the truck driver was killed one of the first 2 fires. The same 2013 report claimed that as many as 9 experienced members of the crew, having joined the ship earlier in the Tampa, were likely to be responsible for 6 separate fires on the Scandinavian Star, as well as multiple acts of sabotage to both ship and the fire crew's efforts to put out the fire. The report proposed the motive for the crime was insurance fraud, as the ship was insured for twice its value shortly before the fire broke out. The report claims that multiple people with insider knowledge of the ship were required for events to unfold as they did. This controversial and unproven report led to a renewed police interest, and in 2014, the investigation was fully reopened and charges dropped against the deceased suspect, Anderson. In March 2015, the Parliament of Norway decided to remove the statute of limitations for arson, such as the criminal investigation and prosecution remains possible. In February 2016, the retired Danish investigator Flemming Thue Jensen, who had led the post-fire investigation in 1990, claimed that the fire was sabotage and was set by the members of the ship's crew, that fire doors had been propped open to allow fire to spread, and that a third flare-up that occurred after the ship had been evacuated of passengers was caused by crew members soaking mattresses with diesel fuel. The incident raised a number of issues relating to fire protection and evacuation on passenger ships. The International Code for Fire Safety Systems of the International Maritime Organization's International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea was comprehensively amended after the disaster in 1992. The burnt ship was towed to Copenhagen, Denmark on April 18, 1990, arriving 2 days later and remaining there for several months. On August 11, 1990, she was towed to United Kingdom, first arriving at Hull before moving to Southampton on September 10, where the vessel was renamed Candy by simply painting over the parts of the original name, which I find very disrespectful. In February 1994, she was sold at Auction International Shipping Partners. February 1994, she was sold at auction in International Shipping Partners. She was renamed Regal Voyager and sent to Italy for rebuilding, then later chartered for Comaret ferries and put on the route between Tangier, Morocco, and Port Vendres, France. In 1997, she was registered to St. Thomas Cruises and put on a route between Port Isabel, Texas, and Puerto Cortes, Honduras, for Isabel Cortes ferry service. Chartered to Ferries del Caribe in 1999. She was put on the route Santo Domingo, San Juan, Puerto Rico. The ship was laid up in Charleston, South Carolina in 2003. Then sold to Indian shipbreakers in 2004 and renamed as Regal Wee. She arrived at the Alang Shipbreaking Yard, India on May 14, 2004, and the work to get her broken up started 5 days later. A few months after the fire, a 2-day memorial voyage was arranged by a survivors support group, clergymen and psychologists, in order to remember the victims and help survivors and family members heal. The voyage was taken by about 300 people who dropped flowers into the North Sea during a sunset memorial service. On 7th of April 2006, a memorial was inaugurated in Oslo near the Akershus fortress. It features a mother carrying her baby and leading another child, a small boy who reaches for his dropped teddy bear. Also a large commemorative plaque with the names of all the victims of the fire. In 2015, on the 25th anniversary of the fire, Queen Sonja of Norway, Norwegian Prime Minister Erna Solberg, Oslo Mayor Fabian Stang, and Denmark's ambassador to Norway Torben Briel paid tribute to the victims and survivors in a waterfront ceremony. A permanent memorial of the Scandinavian Star fire was unveiled in Lysekil on May 13, 2021. In 2020, Danish national television channel DR, Norwegian channel NRK, and Swedish channel TV4 broadcast a 6-hour Nordic documentary named Scandinavian Star, largely based on Politiken journalist Lars Harkslov, The Fire Scandinavian Star Riddle. The documentary went into great detail and made a number of allegations about what happened that night, about why the truth of the Scandinavian Star has never been revealed, how the authorities have let down and bereaved, and how the police investigations into the matter are lacking. Some of the allegations are, contrary to the authorities, several fire experts believe that there were at least 4 fires that night. There was not just one fire propagating through the ship, but rather individual fires started at different times. The fire experts point out that among the evidence to suggest this was the same section of the ship burned twice, and that the Swedish firefighters maintain that all the fires were put out while the ship was being towed to Lysekil, but still an enormous fire broke out in a completely different area of the ship 5 hours after the ship docked. There is no evidence to suggest that Erik Mork Andersen started any of the fires, and Andersen himself perished during the second fire. Several fire experts and Danish Maritime Authority's main investigator, Flemming Thue Henderson, do not believe that the fires were work of some random pyromaniac. They believe that they were all started by professionals who knew what they were doing and knew the ship's layout well. When the second fire was started, 2 fire doors had been blocked to prevent them from closing, one with the 2 mattresses and one with a big concentrate block only accessible to ship's crew. Keeping those fire doors open ensured quick fire propagation because it ensured airflow from car deck beneath the fire, thereby ensuring a wood-stove effect. And the same fire was started in position on the ship that allowed ventilation to carry it to another floors and to the opposite side of the ship. Scandinavian Star was officially purchased by ship owner Henrik Johansen at a highly inflated price and was immediately insured for $24 million by Danish insurance company. Only 1 week later, the ship had been sold to Sea Escape for just $10 million. This may be an indicator of insurance fraud, but this was never been investigated properly by the authorities. A Swedish representative of Pole Ferries, also been interested in purchasing the ship in 1990, said that the Scandinavian Star was a 3-legged horse, and its value was not even close to $20 million since it was old, poorly maintained, and not a roll-on roll-off ferry. The latter is a serious drawback for ferry transporting vehicles because they all have to reverse out the ferry when it arrives instead of just continuing forward the other end of the ship. On the morning of April 7th, while the firefighters were trying to extinguish the flames, 4 members of the ship's crew were flown back to the ship by helicopter: the chief machinist, and the chief electrician, and the captain, Hugo Larsen. They said they wanted to help the firefighters, but the behavior of the chief machinist and the chief electrician was highly suspicious. At one time, the chief electrician kicked wedges away from underneath the fire doors in an attempt to shut the doors. The firefighters deliberately placed the wedges there for their own safety. Also, all 4 members disappeared at one time and another and the firefighters did not see them again. According to several Swedish firefighters, the salvage workers, 3 unknown men emerged from the ship during the night of the Lysekil harbor, before the firefighters could alert the police. Shortly thereafter, an enormous fire broke out in the ship's front restaurant area. This fire quickly rose to temperatures so high that the firefighters were unable to put out the fire for another 12 hours. According to fire brigade, there had been no previous fires anywhere near the restaurant. Several large and suspicious fires had hit the Scandinavian Star and her sister ships while they were sailing in the Caribbean. In 1984, a fire completely destroyed MS Scandinavian Sea and its value was written down to 0. Scandinavian Star was far from seaworthy when it started sailing with passengers in April 1st, and the safety of the passengers was given very low priority. While the ship was docked at the Cuxhaven in Germany in March, an inspector for Norwegian insurance company Skuld inspected the ship and gave specific instructions that several things needed to be fixed before the ship could get a liability insurance, let alone travel with passengers. Among the defects were fire doors that did not close properly, rusty sprinkler systems that could not be tested, critical fire door having been replaced by an ineffective glass door, and not a single fire drill had been conducted at any time. Strangely, Skuld ended up issuing a liability insurance for the ship anyway, despite the inspector's report. According to both Danish and Norwegian maritime authorities, none of them were informed in any way about Scandinavian Star. Therefore, no inspections were conducted by any of the prior to April 7th. According to the Danish Maritime Authority, the ship was registered in Nassau, Bahamas, and therefore they obligate to adhere to much more lenient safety regulations. However, in the documentary, former secretary and chairman of the Danish Association of Sailors, Henrik Berlo, the Scandinavian Star was not ready to transport passengers before the ship was assigned to its during the first week of April in 1990. However, the maritime authorities opted to keep quiet about these after the disaster because it might have been rendered the Statute of Denmark liable for damages. Berlo states that his source is the former management of the maritime authorities, and the maritime authorities postponed their statutory inspection by 2 weeks. The ship burned before the inspection was scheduled. The maritime authorities have been commented Berlo's information, stating that they have found no archival evidence to suggest that any employee had seen the ship or been in its presence. Thank you for watching my video. I know I really messed up my pronunciations at some points, and I know I'm not good at reading foreign names. I suck at reading names, I'm sorry. But, yes, this was my first video, my first research video, I guess, and I hope you guys like it. I've been trying to finish this for a month, and I hope you're watching this on April 7th. This is also my boyfriend's birthday. Happy birthday, my love. And yeah,